Hey there, artists. It's Professor Hannah Walsh here with Module 5. This is our Introduction to Value. These are all of the supplies we're going to need for this week's exercise. I've got a compressed charcoal stick, a vine charcoal stick, a blending stump or a tortillon. I also have a charcoal pencil, a razor to sharpen all of these instruments with, and sandpaper to smooth these instruments with. I also have 3 types of eraser: a gum eraser, a kneaded eraser, and a white plastic eraser. I also have a chamois cloth and a couple of rags to blend with. The first step is, of course, to prepare our materials. So I'm sure you all remember how we sharpened our charcoal pencils last week. So we're going to be doing something very similar to our charcoal sticks. I'd normally be doing this over a garbage can, but I'm just going to do it on a piece of tissue paper. So here's the vine charcoal. I'll be showing you what vine charcoal is all about in a moment. It's very flaky, so it's difficult to get to a point. Just do your best to taper it. Usually very light, rapid scratching does the trick. And I don't so much form it into a point as I do just like a slanted tip, like a chisel shape. And here's my compressed charcoal stick. So usually they come in this square shape. I'll start about halfway down. I'll put my blade about halfway down here on the corner. So this is the edge of the square shape. And I will push that to the end. And I'll press a little bit harder towards the end of the stick so I take off a little bit more at the end. Okay, so I will rotate it and shave this again. So I'm shaving each corner from about halfway down to the tip. So I'm going to do this on all 4 corners. So we still got a pretty fat end on this, but at least it's a little bit round. So then I'll go maybe about, so that's about halfway, go about 1/3 of the way from the end and take off a bit more. Now that it's rounded, I can just rotate it freely rather than going, because the corners don't exist anymore, so just rotate it freely and try to get it tapered to a point. Try to even out any bumps and inconsistencies I see on the way. Now I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just going to keep kind of chipping off bits of the end until I'm getting close to the tip. Okay. That is a pretty fine point. But it's still pretty lumpy, so that's where the sandpaper pad comes in. I'll just scrub it against the sandpaper and rotate it as I do. Lift it up and inspect it just to see how it's doing and where else I need to kind of shave away. And then, of course, test it out. Set this aside. So ideally, you should be able to make, by holding it sideways like this, you should be able to make, yes, a nice broad mark like this, and it should be almost perfectly smooth. So I'm pretty happy with this shape, and I'm going to keep that. I'm going to do the same for my charcoal pencil. The vine charcoal is very fine. You don't need to sand that at all. There, I want my tip to be nice and smooth and round, so I can make the same kind of marks. Perfect. Now we're ready to go. So now I'm going to show you the difference between all of these materials and what unique role they play in the drawing process. So let's start with this vine charcoal. Vine is very fine and it's very brittle. You need to be very careful not to grip it too hard and to not press too hard. It's a very light instrument. Also notice the way that I am holding it. I am not holding it like a pencil between my middle and first finger. I'm holding it, I don't know if any of you have ever played violin, but like a violin bow, like this. Vine charcoal makes very light marks. It does not get very dark. This is compared to compressed charcoal, which is extremely dark. So vine is good for very light sketching, drafting, figuring out the initial elements of your drawing, and then compressed is best used for when you are looking to build in deep, dark values in your composition. So there's compressed and vine, and then of course the pencil, which is good for little small details as well. So this is something to definitely practice when you're holding your charcoal stick, holding it like this, holding it sideways and not straight up and down. This is so you can utilize the side of it. Not only are you creating a line with each mark, you can use the tip to create lines like this. But the idea by using the side of it, you're also creating value, you're creating volume. You can do a lot by just kind of twisting your stylus around. You can make circular shapes just by holding it in the middle and twisting it. Also creating a range of value by pressing hard and then lifting up gently. You can do hatching, even finer hatching with your pencil. All of these are meant to be used in combination with each other. So vine would be good for creating a really light sketch. Let's say, I don't know, an apple. And then I can go in again with the compressed, fill in those values a little bit using the side of it, using the tip of it to get really dark areas in there. And then using the pencil to maybe make some hatch marks, add a little bit of texture, some detail. Blending stump to get some value in there. So the blending stump is good for very controlled blending marks. So if I wanted to kind of give this a hairy texture, I can use the tip of my blending stick to pull out little spikes of value. Or I can pull out value in a more organic shape. Or I could pull out the values on this mark and get it even lighter near the end. So that brings me to the erasers we'll be using. So your best friend, at least my best friend, is the plastic eraser because it lifts things out really well. So I'm subtracting value by marking with my eraser. This is a subtractive technique. Whereas making marks and adding to my composition, adding darkness, adding medium to the surface. This is additive. So we are both using additive and subtractive techniques in our process. Additive is adding charcoal to the paper, and subtractive is removing it to create highlights. So anyway, Mars plastic eraser, the kneaded eraser, which you can knead into any shape that you like. You can flatten it out and sweep out large areas. It lifts things out very gently. You can also kind of make any shape really and dab and twist and lift areas out that way. Kneaded erasers are very gentle, so they're good for kind of delicately removing layers of charcoal from the paper. And then there's the little gum eraser, which isn't quite as strong as the plastic eraser, but not as gentle as the kneaded one. It also kind of smudges the charcoal while you use it. So if you really want to lift stuff out, use the plastic one. If you kind of want to lift and also blend, I would use either of these depending on your needs. Honorary mention goes to this little doohickey. It appears to look like a pencil, but the tip is actually an eraser. So I can sharpen this into a fine point and then make very fine subtractive marks. There. So this is not absolutely required, I just find it very useful. And then the little brush on the end is so you can sweep the eraser crumbs away. Let me show you on the apple how I would use this. So I'd probably start by taking my kneaded eraser and just kind of dabbing out some of these middle values. Maybe kind of use it to lift out a little bit of that reflected light on the underside. Then I can go back in. Since I just want to add a little bit, like light, adding some light value. I'm going to use the vine because I don't want it to be as intense as the compressed. This is a little dark, so I can lift out, subtract out with my plastic eraser. So each tool has its own function. They will all help you make these drawings better and faster than if you did not have a variety of materials to work with. So this chaotic mess is an example of the many things, the many different kinds of marks you can make with charcoal. But we won't quite be using all of them for this first project. We're going to start with something much more simple. So the first part of our assignment is to create a value scale. I have created 4 on this paper. I think you can only see 3 on the camera. But what I've done, I used my ruler to first kind of mark from either end of the page a line. So a line here, a line here. I made sure that they are completely parallel. And then every 2 inches, I made a mark here, and then I left a space of 1 inch here. 2 inches, 1 inch, 2 inches. So I made these dots on either side, and then I connected them. And I did the same thing with marking each of these individual segments here, all the way down. So I have 3 value scales that are 2 inches by 10 inches divided into 10 1-inch sections. For your assignment, you only need to produce one good value scale. I've created multiple here because I know I'm going to goof up on the first one. I don't want you to spend too much time erasing and trying to fuss with the same one over and over again. Give yourself multiple tries to get it right. So this is my process. Step 1. I want to establish that number 1 here is the darkest. This is black. This is the deepest black it's going to get on this scale. I'm using compressed charcoal, by the way. And I'm going to take my rag, kind of blend this out a little bit more. Now that's way too dark. So then I can take my chamois cloth here. Chamois cloths remove, kind of like the kneaded erasers, are able to lift out a lot of charcoal at once, but very gently, very gradually. That's a little bit better. I'm going to get my blending stump and kind of fill in these lonely edges of these sections. Okay, but I'm still seeing a lot of medium gray. So I should have kept this completely white, but I can take it out with my eraser. It's all good. Try to avoid getting any marks in your final panel here, just so you can keep it the same white as the paper. Okay. So this is by no means a perfect scale. So I know for certain that this transition from the white to this value is way too abrupt. So I'm going to use my kneaded eraser and maybe try to pull up some of this. So now I can lift this up a little bit. So far this is looking good. Now I'm going to switch over to this end. Right now it looks like this transition between these two is also very abrupt. These kind of all look the same. I'm going to use my blending stump and kind of bring some of this pigment over some of the charcoal from, since there's so much in this one, I want it to kind of come on over here. You know, I might use my rag for this. Since I'm kind of losing some of my contours here, I'm going to go back in and fix that. Still think I can make this a little bit darker, so I'm going to start hatching. So you can use a combination of blending and hatching in order to get the value just right. And then once you've got it hatched, you can smudge. Okay, so now I've got these two transitioning pretty well. I can start making this one a little bit darker. And if it gets too dark, I can always go back and lift a little bit out with my chamois cloth. Still a little bit of charcoal on the end of my tortillon, so I'm just going to use that to kind of draw with it. I don't even have to add any more, really. So I feel like I'm pretty close here. The hard part is filling up the entire square, just so it's consistent throughout. Now I made that too dark, so I'm gonna try lifting it up again. I'm also going to erase the outer edges just so my contours stay really clean. Charcoal is messy, so keeping things clean is a challenge that is not possible to perfect. So do the best you can. So that's my practice value scale. You can also number it numbers 1 through 10. And I want you to keep practicing. You're not going to get it on the first try. I don't think I fully got it on the first try, but I got pretty darn close for as fast as I did this. It'll take you a little bit longer to get it just right. So I'm going to try one more time, but I'm not going to make any commentaries, so I'm just going to speed through it and see how it goes. Alright, that's not so bad either. So before you get started on your value scale, which you are going to do on drawing paper, so your value scale needs to be drawn on drawing paper, but I have done these practice ones on newsprint, so I recommend that you practice on newsprint and then move on to the drawing paper once you feel confident that you've got it. So once you have your value scale complete, now we're going to move on to the next part of your assignment. This is value reduction. Value reduction is where you simplify a large scale of values into smaller groups. So instead of 10 on my value scale, I only have 5. So these are the 5 values that I am going to use in this drawing. Your value reduction is going to be based on a photo of yourself or of a friend. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be working off of a photo of myself.